Hey YouTube, it's me, it's the man who likes to RANT, dropping a fresh VID for you today, and today I finally began the project I've wanted to and talked about for a while. I began the Royal Rumble Retrospective. Now you may be asking yourself, Ranter, why would you start a project on the Royal Rumble with WrestleMania right around the corner? Well, the answer is simple. The Royal Rumble is one of the few pay-per-views that even the most jaded wrestling fan will still tune into, even to this day and age. Why? Because there's still mystery and intrigue involved in that event. You never know what you're going to see or who's going to show up, be it a returning veteran that you haven't seen in a while that makes an appearance in the Rumble match, or in the case of this year, you have a debut like AJ Styles, which set the place on fire. So in order to understand how far the Rumble has fallen in recent years, I think we need to go back and re-examine the beginnings of the event and see what WWE used to do right that they're not doing now. So it began in 1988 in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. The beginning match was Ricky the Dragon Steamboat versus a young, ravishing Rick Rude. And by young, I mean, I believe he was in his rookie year with the company. This match, for what it was back in 1988, was good. If I had watched it back then, in fact, I would have had no problem with it. It's one of those matches, unfortunately, that hasn't aged well over time. A lot of, arm drags and arm bars that seem to go on for way longer than it should. One of my favorite comical parts of the match was, at one point, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat is in a camel clutch, which is applied by Ravishing Rick Rude, and you can see him using his hands like this to get the fans to get behind him and start clapping, and I find it hilarious that if he had done that today, he would be considered tapping out, but fortunately that is a rule that didn't become instituted till 1997, when they had Ken Shamrock in the party. Match ends when Ricky goes for a flying crossbody off the top rope, and Rick Rude pulls the referee into it, and then while Rude has Ricky in his then finisher known as the Body Breaker, a standing backbreaker where you hold your opponent over your shoulder and kind of push down to apply pressure. The ref comes over and taps Rude, and Rude assumes that Steamboat has submitted, so he drops it and thinks he won, walking around like this, right? And then the ref says that no, that Rude was disqualified and the winner is Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. A decent match, and Ricky Rude made a good showing. He would go on to be much better as he got more polished, and he would get more polished after having a great mind in the business, Bobby Heenan, work with him. So, on the whole, good things. We're nearing the end of Ricky Steamboat's WWE run, and that makes me sad because as good as Ricky was, he never reached the accolades that he got in the NWA in the WWE, and I think that's sad because all he ever really wanted to be was a family man, and he was certainly a fantastic wrestler. But I digress. That move on. Next thing that happened in the event was Dino Bravo attempting to break the, at the time, standing bench press record of 710 pounds, I believe it was. This was a funny segment to watch because Dino Bravo, I almost said is, but was a fantastically powerful man. I mean, some of the weight that he was doing in this demonstration, if you weren't impressed by it, you need to have your head examined because this dude was a powerhouse and built like a brick shithouse too. The interaction that he had with Jesse is a good heel dynamic. In fact, the interaction with the fans is exactly how I believe more heels should be behaving in the current product. The few heels that are left, like a Rusev, a Kevin Owens, and even a Del Rio, could benefit from watching just the subtle nuances of how this heel interacted with the audience. And also, this would end up getting Bravo over for much longer than it probably should have, because everyone wants to point out every time that Bravo would be introduced as the world's strongest man after this, that if not for Jesse Ventura helping him, he never would have gotten the final weight up. And you could see that that's true, because as Bravo is trying to lift it up, I think he's trying to do it legit. But you can see the oh shit look on his face when he realizes he can't do it, and Jesse's like right there, as a good spotter should be, ready to help him up. And then, the Mean Gene isn't paying attention to how hard Jesse's pointing. He's like, he did it! But, I think Oakland was paid to be somewhat stupid in his reaction. And I'm not saying Mean Gene's stupid. I love Mean Gene to death, but, a good little cool down period. Next we come to what I would consider to be the most interesting match on the whole card, because it was a 2 out of 3 falls women's match for the WWE Women's Tag Team Championship. It featured Leilani Kai and Judy Martin, collectively known as the Glamour Girls, versus a team from Japan. Their names were Izuki and Noreno. I believe I have that right. And they were known as the Jumping Bomb Angels. The Jumping Bomb Angels, to me, were really impressive because they did a lot. I mean, they did the suplex stuff that you saw women do, but there was also a lot of high-flying things that they did, missile drop kicks and axe handles. I was so impressed by the Bomb Angels that I do believe, to this day, if I was capable of going back in a time machine, plucking them out of the 1988 era and sticking them in with the Attitude Era Divas, that they could have at least done very well for themselves. Although at that point it would be strictly in singles competition. But they say to be a good tag team wrestler, you first have to be a good singles wrestler. So I guess we'd have to see. But they really could have been something then, I believe. They were something this day. And the only thing that made me feel bad is they would win the match in typical bad guys get first fall and good guys get the 2 remaining falls. Something that was common in the 80s and 90s back then. They would win, and then I believe a couple weeks later, WWE would end up debunking the women's tag team division altogether. And then, several months later, they would actually, it would make it another year and a half, I think, that they would do away with the singles women's title. So it could have been a launching pad. It was chosen not to be. So that makes me sad, but I don't think you'll find anyone complaining about it, at least from that era, because it was just what needed to be done according to Vince McMahon. And, you can be sad about it if you want, but you don't have to be. Moving on. Next we had the contract signing between Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan for their infamous Saturday Night Main Event, or I believe it was just the main event back then, where, there would be controversy and the result of that match would create the tournament for WrestleMania 4. I thought, Ted DiBiase was a fantastic mouthpiece for Andre. I thought that some points of the contract signing was a little too theatrical, although some of that couldn't be helped because Andre is so big that it takes him a while to sit in a normal chair, and a man Andre the Giant size does not look comfortable sitting in a normal chair. Although I will say that for that man back then, I imagine there were quite a few places that he didn't feel very comfortable in. Beg your pardon. Hogan did a great job looking scared because he should be nervous. Also, it may not have been a complete kayfabe act, because Hogan has admitted both in biographies and face-to-face interviews that anytime he had to work with Andre the Giant, he would have to pull his car over on the way to the arena and have a little moment where he gets sick in order to stabilize his stomach. Because when you're working with Andre that big, there's always an increased risk that you're going to get hurt and hurt badly. And it wouldn't necessarily be Andre's fault, because Andre and Hogan were good friends back then, or so I understand. So I'd be nervous facing a man that big. I can't blame Hogan. Heels get the jump when Andre tips the table onto Hogan, and then Andre and Virgil, and I don't know if DiBiase and Virgil did a little jumping on Hulk Hogan. I think Andre might have gotten a few shots in too. So a good way to set the heat up for the heels, and a good way to show that Hogan might actually be in trouble with this one. Now we move on to the Rumble. You can tell that this event was still in its infancy. It would just be 20 men as opposed to the standard 30 that would come just 1 year later. You can also tell that this match meant nothing because of who they had win it. Hacksaw Jim Duggan would win after pulling the top rope down so the one-man gang could go over. And, well, it's great to have a fan favorite win the first match, so you hope people would get behind it. I'd like to think there could have been somebody better that they would have chosen. But actually, I looked at the remaining roster, and there weren't that many big baby faces that could have gone over and benefited from this. Plus, it's the first, like I said, they're still trying to find their feet. This was also unique because this is one of the few times in the Rumble's history that we would actually have a match after the Royal Rumble. And it would be a 2 out of 3 fall tag team match featuring the tag team of Tonga Tom and Haku, known as the Islanders, versus Paul Roma and Jimmy Powers, collectively known as the Young Stallions. These two teams went out and put on a good show. The unfortunate thing is both teams would have significant injuries, forcing Paul Roma and Haku, respectively, to embark on singles careers. Roma's single career wouldn't go anywhere, for the rest of his career. Roma was one of those guys that was best working with somebody else. Haku would prove to be a solid worker, and would go on for a nice long run that would see him work well into the 2000s. Some would argue that he was even working, past his expiration date, but, you get work when you can. But anyway, nothing that really wowed me. This whole event was really kind of blah, and WWE would go on to do much better. My overall rating for this pay-per-view is a C+. It gave them a good, solid base to work with, and they would make significant improvements within a short time. So, what was your favorite Rumble to watch? You can post that down in the comments. Tell me about some of your favorite Royal Rumble moments. Tell me about some of your favorite Rumble eliminations or avoiding of eliminations. Ranter off the soapbox. I'll catch you guys later. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.